Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm telling a story about an orphan boy. So let's start. The 42nd story of Oliver Twist. Oliver hears the truth. After 2 days, Oliver found himself in a carriage rolling fast towards his native town. Mrs. Maylie Rose, Mrs. Bedwin, and a good doctor were with him. Mr. Brownlow followed in a post chaise, accompanied by one other person whose name had not been mentioned. Oliver was agitated and uncertain. He and the two ladies had been very carefully told about Monk's admissions by Mr. Brownlow. See there, cried Oliver, eagerly clasping Rose's hand and pointing out at the carriage window. That's the style. I came over. There are the hedges I crept behind. Beyond is the old house where I was a little kid. Oh, Dick, my old dear friend. If I could see only you now. You will see him soon, replies Rose, gently taking his folded hands between her own. Yes, said Oliver, and we will take him away from here and have him clothed and taught and send him to some quiet country place where he may grow strong and well. Shall we? Rose nodded, yes, for the boy was smiling through such happy tears that she could not speak. As they approached the town, Oliver pointed out Sawbury, the undertaker's house, Gamfield's cart. There was the workhouse. There was nearly everything as if he had left it but yesterday. They drove straight to the chief hotel. Mr. Brownlow did not join them at dinner, but remained in a separate room. The two other gentlemen hurried in and out anxiously, and during the short intervals when they were present, conversed apart. One Mrs. Maylie was called away for nearly an hour. She returned with eyes swollen with weeping. All these things made Rose and Oliver nervous and uncomfortable. At 9 o'clock, Mr. Losberne and Mr. Greywig entered the room, followed by Mr. Brownlow and Monks, and Oliver almost shrieked in surprise, for they told him it was his brother. Monks looked hatefully at the astonished boy and sat down near the door. This child, said Mr. Brownlow, drawing Oliver to him and laying his hand upon his head, is your half brother, the illegitimate son of your father, my dear friend, Edwin Leaford, by poor young Agnes Fleming, who died in giving him birth. He was born in this town. In the workhouse of this town, was the sullen reply. You have the story there. He pointed impatiently to the papers as he spoke. I must have it here, too, said Mr. Brownlow, looking round upon the listeners. Listen then, replied Monks. His father being taken ill at Rome was joined by my mother and me, from whom he had been long separated. He knew nothing of us, for his senses were gone, and he died the next day. Among the papers in his desk, one was directed to yourself, a letter to the girl Agnes, the others a will. What of the letter? Asked Mr. Brownlow. He had written to the girl that some secret mystery, to be explained one day, prevented his marrying her. Just then, he reminded her of the day he had given her the little locket and a ring with her Christian name engraved upon it, and a blanket left for that which he hoped one day to have bestowed upon her. Prayed her to keep it and wear it next her heart, as she had done before. The will, said Mr. Brownlow, as Oliver's tears fell fast. Monks was silent. The will, said Mr. Brownlow, speaking for him, was in the same spirit as the letter. He talked of miseries which his wife and her rebellious disposition, vices, and premature bad passions had brought upon him, and left you and your mother, each an annuity of £800. The bulk of his property he divided into two equal portions, one for Agnes Fleming and the other from their child. If it were a girl, it was to inherit the money unconditionally, but if a boy, only if he would never have stained his name with any public act of dishonor, meanness, cowardice, or wrong. In such a case, the money was to come to you. My mother, said Monks, in a louder tone, burned this will. The letter never reached its destination, but that another proof she kept. The girl's father, shameful and dishonor, fled with his children into a remote corner of Wales. He changed his name so that his friends might never find him. The girl had left her home some weeks before. She searched for her, but fearing that she had killed herself to hide their shame, his old heart broke and he died of soon after. Years after this, Brownlow said, this man, Edward Leaford Mothers, came to me. He had left her, when only 18, robbed her of jewels and money, gambled, squandered, forged, and fled to London. Here for 2 years he had associated with the lowest outcast. She was sinking under a painful and incurable disease and wished to recover him before she died. Finally traced, he went back with her to France. Then she died, said monks, after a lingering illness and on her deathbed. She bequeathed these secrets to me. She believed that a male child had been born and was alive. I swore to her, if even it crossed my path, to hunt it down, never to let it rest, to pursue it with the hunted down, to pursue it with the bitterest and the most unrelenting animosity, and if I could, taken it to the very gallows. She was right. He came in my way at last. I began well, and but couldn't finish as I began. The locket and the ring? Said Mr. Brownlow, turning to monks. I bought them for the man and woman I told you of, who stole them from the nurse, who stole them from the corpse, asked Monks without raising his eyes. You know what became of them? Mr. Brownlow merely nodded to Mr. Grimmick, who returned pushing in Mrs. Bumble. Mr. Brownlow pointed to Monks. Do you know that person? I never saw him in all my life, said Mr. Bumble. Not sold him anything, perhaps. No, replied Mrs. Bumble. You never had, perhaps, a certain gold locket and ring, said Mr. Brownlow. Certainly not, replied the matron. Why are we brought here to answer to such nonsense as this? Again Mr. Brownlow nodded to Mr. Grimmick, and he led in his two palaced women, who quickly recounted that night. We hear her tell you what she had done, and saw you take a paper from her hand and watched you two, next day to the pawnbroker shops, said the first. Yes, added the second, and it was a locket and gold ring. We found out that, and saw it given you. We were by. Would you like to see the pawnbroker's himself? Asked Mr. Grimmick. No, replied the woman. I have nothing more to say. I did not sell them, as they were where you will never get them. What then? Nothing, replied Mr. Brownlow, except that we will take care that neither of you is employed in a situation of trust again. You may leave the room. Young lady, said Mr. Brownlow, turning to Rose, give me your hand. Do not tremble. You need not fear to hear the few remaining words we have to say. Mr. Brownlow turned towards Monks. Do you know this young lady, sir? Yes, replied Monks. The father of the unhappy Agnes had 2 daughters, said Mr. Brownlow. What was the fate of the other? The child? The child, replied Monks, when her father died, was taken by some wretched cottagers who reared it their own. My mother found it, after a year of cunning search. She told them the history of the sister she bade them take good heed of the child, for she came of bad blood. The people believed it, and ill treated her until a widow lady, residing then at Chester, saw the girl by chance, pitied her, and took her home. I lost sight of her 2 or 3 years ago, and saw her no more until a few months back. Do you see her now? Yes, leaning on your arm. But not the less my niece, cried Miss Amelie, folding the fainting girl in her arms. Not the less my dearest child. I would not lose her now, for all the treasures of the world. She is my own dear girl. My heart will burst. I cannot bear all this, cried Rose, clinging to her. I will never call her aunt, sister, my own dear sister that taught my heart to love so dearly from the first. Rose, dear darling Rose, cried Oliver, throwing his arms about her neck. Let the tears which fell and the broken words which were exchanged in the long, close embrace between the orphans be scared. A soft tap at the door at length announced Harry Maylie's arrival. Oliver left the room. I know it all, he said, taking a seat beside the lovely girl. Dear Rose, I know it all. I am not here by accident, he added after a long silence. Do you guess that I have come to remind you of a promise? The disclosure of tonight, replied Rose softly, leaves me in the same position with reference to you as that in which I stood before. If my word cannot be yours, I shall make yours mine. This is my rank and station now, and here I lay it down. The supper had been waiting for a long time. I had serious thoughts of eating my head tonight, said Mr. Grimmick. I will take the liberty, if you will allow me, of saluting the bride that is to be. Oliver, my child, said Mrs. Maylie, where have you been, and why do you look so sad? Why are you crying? What's the matter? Poor Dick was dead.